The storm had been building all evening, rolling across the city like a grudge thunder, pressing against the windows until the glass shook in its frame. I sat alone in the apartment, the chipped mug warm in my hand, coffee gone cold hours ago. The radiator hissed, the lights flickered, and I told myself the knocking I imagined was only the wind. But then I heard it, 3 sharp raps against the door. Not hesitant, not polite, a demand. 3 knocks that carried weight, like someone who had decided they could no longer wait. My chest tightened. I wasn't expecting anyone. I didn't get visitors, not anymore. When I opened the door, he was standing there. Alex. 16 years old, soaked to the bone, rain dripping off his hair, a hoodie clinging to his shoulders like wet skin. His sneakers squeaked against the hallway floor, and his eyes, God, his eyes, they burned hotter than the storm behind him. "Alex," I whispered, grabbing for a towel, for words, for anything. But he pushed my hand away, didn't even bother to wipe the rain from his face. For a moment we just stared at each other, the storm cracking through the silence, lightning flashing across the room, turning him into someone I barely recognized. Not a boy, not yet a man, but something in between, raw and dangerous. And then he spoke. His voice cut through me, sharper than thunder, louder than the rain. "Why did you let him do it, Dad?" No hesitation, no soft landing, straight into the wound I thought I had buried. I froze, because I knew exactly what he meant. He wasn't asking about tonight or the rain or some fight at school. He was asking about that night, the night his grandfather, William Harrington, stood under chandeliers and golden light and tore me apart with words meant for a crowd. The night I swallowed my pride and called it survival. The night I chose silence. The question hung in the air, heavy as the storm outside, and in his eyes I saw something I hadn't faced until now. Disappointment. Anger. A boy demanding answers from the man who was supposed to give them. I opened my mouth, but nothing came. The excuses, the reasons, the careful words I'd told myself for months sounded like ash in my throat. The storm rattled the window, the doorframe groaned, and still he stood there, waiting. "Why did you let him do it?" he said again this time, softer but sharper still. And the way he said Dad like it wasn't a title anymore, but a question I had to earn. The question still echoed in my head, but to understand why it cut so deep, you'd have to go back to the silence. After the storm of my marriage ended, back to the moment when a home became just 4 walls, and a man became just a shadow of who he thought he was. The divorce wasn't a fight, it wasn't screaming or broken dishes. It was a stamp, a clerk, sliding papers across a wooden table, her voice flat as she told us where to sign. Her hand moved quickly without shaking. Mine trembled like it was carrying the weight of a collapsed tower. One thud of the stamp and that was it, a marriage dismantled as easily as scaffolding pulled down. I moved into a small apartment on the east side. One window that stared into a brick alley, a radiator that coughed more than it warmed a mattress on the floor, a chipped mug on the counter. That was my kingdom now. The silence there wasn't kind. It wasn't the kind of quiet you rest in. It pressed on your chest, made you remember every mistake in stereo. At night, I'd sit by the window, sketchbook open, trying to remind myself I was still an architect. But the pencil felt heavier every day, and the lines I drew looked less like buildings and more like ruins. The hardest part wasn't losing the house or the firm or the respect I once had in every boardroom. The hardest part was the calendar on my fridge. Black ink dividing my children into time slots. Emma every other weekend, Alex every other week. My family turned into an equation. Custody boxes instead of birthdays, handovers instead of hugs. Emma tried to make it easier. She'd call me at night, her little voice carrying across the distance. She'd tell me how she and Mr. Rabbit, her stuffed toy, missed me, how she wanted pancakes that were crispy on the edges like I made them, how my apartment smelled funny, but safe. She drew hearts on the calendar whenever she came, as if love could fill in the missing days. But Alex was different. 16, old enough to understand everything but too young to carry it. When he stayed over, he barely spoke. One-word answers: school fine, team fine, friends fine. He ate what I cooked, without comment, sat on the couch, scrolling his phone, and kept a distance that hurt more than anger ever could. I tried to break through. I suggested walks by the river, old movies I loved, black and white films where men in hats said things slowly like words were bricks you had to lay carefully. Sometimes he'd sit with me pretending to watch his face lit by the glow of his phone instead of the screen. And once, just once, he laughed. Quick, small, but enough to keep me going. Enough to make me think maybe the bridge between us wasn't gone just under repair. But the truth is, I felt him slipping away. Every week the silence grew heavier, like bolts loosening on a structure I couldn't reinforce. And all the while the shadow of his grandfather hung over us, the Harrington legacy, the power, the humiliation I had swallowed that night under chandeliers and applause. I thought keeping my head down would protect them. But to Alex it looked like cowardice. It looked like surrender. I didn't know it yet, but every quiet dinner, every word I didn't say, every time I looked away, instead of standing tall, it was building toward that night in the storm, toward 3 sharp knocks on my door, toward a son who would no longer let his father stay small. The thing about distance is it doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in inch by inch like cracks running through concrete you thought was solid. You don't notice until one day the bridge doesn't hold the weight anymore. With Alex it showed up in the smallest ways. He stopped asking me for help with homework. He stopped telling me when practice ran late. He'd come in, drop his duffel bag by the couch and disappear into his phone as if my apartment was just a layover on the way to somewhere else. Meals became the hardest part. I'd cook badly. Overcooked pasta pancakes, too thick in the middle, chicken, dry enough to need a glass of water after every bite. He ate it in silence, his fork scraping the plate like a clock, ticking louder with each second. I wanted to ask if it was okay. I wanted to laugh and admit I had no idea what I was doing. But the words stayed stuck in my throat. So I sat there chewing, pretending it tasted fine. Pretending we were fine. One Saturday, I suggested we go to the park. Emma was with her mum, and I thought maybe a walk might loosen the silence. The air smelled of cut grass, kids were running with kites, couples argued gently over nothing, life buzzing all around us while the two of us walked side by side like strangers sharing the same sidewalk. We passed a family, a father lifting his daughter onto his shoulders, her laughter spilling out like bells. I caught Alex looking, his jaw tightening, his hands shoved deep in his hoodie pocket. I looked away because I didn't know what to do with the ache that burned in my chest. But the moment that cut deepest came in the most ordinary place, a hardware store. I was buying screws for the table that wobbled in my apartment, trying to act like fixing a piece of furniture would somehow fix my life. We stood in line when a man across the aisle recognized me, not as Daniel the architect, but as Daniel the man married into the Harringtons. He smiled without kindness, shame about the firm, he said, his voice carrying just loud enough. Then he added, "Well, the Harringtons, they always build things that last." The words dripped like acid. He wanted Alex to hear them. He wanted me to swallow them. And I did. I smiled, small and weak, stared at the paint samples in my hand like they could protect me. I said nothing. When we walked out, Alex was a few steps ahead, shoulders stiff, his silence louder than any shout. He didn't look at me, didn't have to. I could feel it, the disappointment radiating off him like heat from asphalt. I had failed him again, not by losing everything, but by refusing to stand tall even in the rubble. And that night, he slept on the couch, headphones in back turned. I lay on the mattress staring at the ceiling, listening to the hiss of his phone's rain sounds, wondering how much longer I could keep pretending that silence was dignity. The truth was, the gap between us had become a canyon. Every day, every word unspoken, the distance stretched wider. And in his eyes, I was no longer a father worth looking up to. I was a man shrinking into his own shadow. I didn't know it then, but that distance was building pressure like water behind a dam, and when it broke, it would come crashing down in the storm. The storm that night was merciless. Rain hammered the windows, wind screamed down the alley like a warning, and thunder rolled so close it rattled the radiator in its bones. That's when the knock came. 3 of them, firm, unmistakable, not the sound of a neighbor, not the landlord. It was a demand, a declaration. I opened the door, and there he was, Alex, soaked through hair plastered to his forehead, hoodie dripping onto the hallway carpet, his eyes sharp, fierce, glowing with a fire that made me feel smaller than I ever had. He stepped inside without waiting. Water pooled under his sneakers and I fumbled for a towel, but he pushed it away. His jaw was set like stone. "Why did you let him do it, Dad?" The question hit like lightning. I knew exactly what he meant. That night, under golden lights and glass walls, when William Harrington, his grandfather, stood on stage and tore me apart in front of the city, when laughter rippled through the ballroom, when I sat frozen, my wife silent beside me, my children watching, when I swallowed every word I wanted to scream and called it survival. I didn't want to fight in front of everyone, I stammered. Your grandfather controls everything. I thought maybe keeping quiet was better than... Better than what? Alex snapped, his voice cutting sharper than the storm outside. Better than standing up for yourself. For us? You think hiding makes you strong? It doesn't, Dad. It makes you look small. The words pierced deeper than any insult William had ever thrown at me. Because they came from my son, from the boy who used to look at me like I could build anything. Now he looked at me like I had crumbled. I sank into the chair, buried my face in my hands. For months I had carried shame like a secret shield, telling myself silence was dignity. But in his eyes it wasn't dignity at all, it was surrender. He paced the small room, fists clenched, voice trembling with fury and pain. I don't care about the money, I don't care about their name, I just want my dad back. The one who believed every brick mattered, the one who told me even the smallest piece could hold the weight of the whole. What happened to him? His words broke me open, because I remembered. I remembered telling him that lesson when he was building Legos on the living room floor, frustrated that a small piece didn't fit. I had knelt down and told him every brick mattered. And now, years later, my own son was holding me to my words. My hands shook as I stood. Slowly, carefully, I crossed the room. He flinched just slightly, but I placed my hands on his shoulders, firm, steady, trembling all at once. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I thought protecting you meant keeping my head down. I thought swallowing it all would save us. But I see now. Protecting you means standing up even when it hurts. Even when I lose." His chest rose and fell, his eyes glassy but unblinking. And for the first time in months, maybe years, we looked at each other without walls between us. The storm still roared outside, rain still battered the glass, but inside, something shifted. Not anger, not shame. Something older, something stronger. He let out a shaky breath. And then, in a voice softer than the rain, he said, "I just needed to hear that." I pulled him into my arms, clumsy, awkward, but real. His hoodie was cold, his hair damp against my cheek, and I held on as though if I let go, the distance between us would return. The radiator groaned, the window shook, but for the first time in a long time I felt steady, because my son, my angry, hurting, unflinching son, had given me the chance to stand again. After the storm inside us had broken, what was left wasn't silence, but something gentler, something new. We didn't pull apart after that clumsy embrace. We just stood there, two shapes in a room that had felt too small for too long. And slowly, like dawn breaking over ruins, the weight began to shift. I let him go first. Alex stepped back, wiped his sleeve across his face, half from the rain, half from the tears he didn't want me to name. He dropped his bag by the couch, not like a guest, but like he used to when he was a boy coming home from school. Tea, I asked, because coffee felt too sharp for a night like this. He nodded, and that nod, small, almost reluctant, felt like a door creaking open. We sat at the wobbly table, two mugs steaming between us, the chipped one still in my hands. The storm outside began to tire, rain softening against the glass, thunder rolling further away like it knew it wasn't needed here anymore. At first, we didn't talk about the gala or the Harringtons or the wreckage that had brought us here. Instead, we started with the ordinary, the small things we hadn't shared in too long. He told me about school, how his math teacher still called him Harrington in roll call, and how every time it made the other kids look at him differently, like he wasn't himself but a name he never chose. I listened, really listened, and when I asked questions, I didn't do it like a father checking homework. I did it like a man being let back into his son's world. He told me about practice, how he stayed later than he should, just to burn through the frustration. About a fight not with fists but with silence, with a friend who once said your dad's only as big as his paycheck. Alex had walked away that day, but the words had sat in him like a stone he couldn't spit out. Now he was finally putting it down, and I told him my truths too. How I had been trying to sketch again, but my hands shook. How sometimes the lines looked more like fractures than buildings. How I had taken a small job at a cafe that wanted nothing fancy, just a space that felt alive. His eyes flickered at that, not judgment, just interest. Like maybe he believed I still had something to build. At one point I tried to make him laugh. I told him about Emma naming the half-dead plant on my windowsill brave, about how she sang to it as if sunlight wasn't enough. And he did laugh. Not loud, not long, but enough. And I laughed too, the sound strange in my own mouth, like hearing a song I used to know but had forgotten the melody. Time slipped. The mugs went empty. The storm faded into nothing more than a soft drip from the gutter. But still we talked. Not about fixing everything, not about rewriting the past. Just about being here in this room, in this moment, after so many nights of silence. By the time the sky began to lighten, his head drooped against the back of the chair, eyes, heavy voice softer. I should go before Mom freaks out, he murmured, but his body didn't move right away. And I didn't rush him, because for the first time in years, my son felt at home here. Finally, he stood, pulling his hoodie tighter. At the door, he turned a tired smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Don't worry, Dad," he said. "I'll be back." "You're not getting rid of me that easy." The door clicked shut behind him, leaving only the scent of rain and tea, and a silence that didn't crush me anymore, a silence that felt hopeful. I sat there, hands wrapped around the chipped mug, and whispered to the room, to the night, to myself, "He's coming back." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. After that night, something shifted. Not a mirror, not a sudden fixing of everything broken, but a steady change, like a foundation finally settling after years of strain. Alex came back the next weekend, not because the calendar said so, but because he chose to. He dropped his bag by the door the way he used to when he was a boy, rushing in from the cold, and collapsed on the couch without asking. That one simple act, his choice to claim space here, was louder than any words. I tried cooking again. This time it was eggs scrambled too fast, burnt around the edges. I groaned, apologized, ready for silence. But Alex smirked, poked at the blackened pieces with his fork and said, "At least you tried, Dad." Then he ate it anyway. And we laughed, real laughter this time, the kind that fills a room instead of echoing off empty walls. Bit by bit we found our way back. One night the table wobbled so badly his glass nearly toppled. I cursed under my breath and he raised an eyebrow. "You're an architect who can't fix a table." He went to his bag, pulled out a screwdriver, and together we got down on our knees, adjusting, tightening, testing. It wasn't just about the table, it was about working side by side, shoulders, brushing, laughing when we made it worse before making it better. And when the wobble finally steadied, he grinned. "There you go, not bad for an old man." Emma helped too. When she visited, she declared the apartment too quiet, so she filled it with her laughter, with her drawings taped to the fridge, with her little rituals that made even bare walls feel like home. She insisted the plant by the window was family now. She named it, Brave, drew a smiley face on the pot, and watered it like it was her duty. Alex rolled his eyes, but I caught him one morning, turning the plant toward the light. He didn't know I saw. And then came the cafe project, a small job, a corner space in need of warmth, a place no big firm would bother with. But it mattered to me. I showed Alex my sketches one night, lines that had felt shaky in my hands, but steady on the page. To my surprise, he leaned over the table, eyes scanning the drawings with focus. "You should add more light here," he said, pointing. "People like sitting near windows." I stared at him, half stunned, half proud. He noticed. He cared. Weeks passed like that. Not easy, not perfect, but alive. He'd come after practice, dump his gym bag by the door, and raid my fridge like it was his own. He teased my cooking, I teased his hair, and sometimes we just sat together in silence that didn't hurt anymore. One Saturday afternoon I walked him through the cafe space in person, the smell of sawdust, the echo of hammers, the skeleton of something waiting to be alive. He leaned against the counter frame, watching me explain the flow of light, the shape of seating, the way warmth travels through a room if you build it right. He nodded slowly. "You know, you're different now." I raised an eyebrow. "Different good or different bad?" He smirked, shrugged. "Different alive." The words hit me harder than any insult his grandfather ever threw, because they came from him, from the boy who once looked at me with disappointment, now looking at me with something closer to trust. That night, Emma curled up on the couch with Brave beside her. Alex stretched out in the armchair, pretending not to laugh as she told him stories about her stuffed rabbit. And I sat back watching the two of them, listening to the rhythm of their voices, and for the first time in years the apartment didn't feel like a waiting room. It felt like home. Brick by brick, moment by moment, we were rebuilding. Not towers, not legacies, just us. And that was enough. Morning always used to feel heavy, a reminder of another day to survive. But slowly, almost without me noticing, mornings began to change. One Sunday, sunlight slipped past the blinds, golden and soft, spilling across the floor of the apartment. The air smelled faintly of syrup and burnt toast. Emma sat at the table, her legs swinging off the chair, a plate of lumpy pancakes in front of her, and Brave the plant watching proudly from the windowsill. She laughed as she drizzled too much syrup, letting it run into rivers across her plate. Alex leaned against the counter, taller now, shoulders broader, pretending to be annoyed at her antics, but I caught the smirk tugging at his mouth. He flicked a blueberry at her, she squealed, and for a moment the apartment sounded like a place I had thought I'd lost forever. I stood in the doorway, coffee in the chipped mug, warming my hands, watching them. Just watching. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a shadow in their lives. I felt present. Here. With them. When Alex noticed me staring, he rolled his eyes in that way teenagers do, half embarrassed, half amused. "You're different now," he said, casually, but there was something behind it, something he didn't try to hide anymore. I raised an eyebrow. "Different good or different bad?" He shrugged, smirked. "Different alive." The words landed softly, but they filled the room more than sunlight ever could. Alive, not powerful, not wealthy, not respected by boardrooms or ballrooms, just alive. And for him, for Emma, for me, that was enough. The apartment still had cracks, the table still wobbled if you leaned on it wrong, the radiator still groaned like an old man in winter. But in that moment, with their laughter spilling into the morning light, it didn't matter, because those cracks were filled with something stronger than plaster. They were filled with us. I lifted my mug in a small private toast, to pancakes that didn't hold their shape, to plants named Brave, to laughter in small rooms, to a son who came back in the rain, and a father who finally learned how to stand tall. And when Emma caught me smiling, she asked, "Daddy, what are you thinking about?" I shook my head, kept my voice steady, but inside my chest my heart was steady too. "I'm just thinking," I said, "this feels like home." And for once, home didn't mean a house or a family name or the approval of anyone else. It meant this. A morning, a laugh, a life rebuilt brick by brick. We don't talk much about that night at the gala anymore. We don't need to. It sits where it sits, not a wound, not a victory, but a marker on the map of who we became. The Harrington name, the empire, the humiliation, all of it has shrunk to background noise. Sometimes it rains, sometimes it doesn't. We keep umbrellas by the door and we keep walking. When it does come up, usually in a sideways way, Emma asking why Grandpa doesn't visit, or Alex mentioning him in a story, told like a joke, we glance at each other and we both nod. The way builders do when they've checked a beam together and silently agree it will hold. Alex still knocks on my door, even though he has a key now. 3 knocks, steady, deliberate. A signal, a memory turned into a greeting. And I answer faster than I used to. I answer with the light already on. I answer like the door has been waiting. The chipped mug still sits on the counter. I thought about replacing it once. I even picked up a new on smooth, flawless, no history. But when I held it, it felt empty. So I set it back on the shelf and walked out with nothing, because the truth is the cracks don't make it useless. The cracks make it mine. Brave, the plant has grown taller, leaves stretching toward the light Emma insists on giving it. Alex waters it when she forgets, pretending it's no big deal. And the table. It still wobbles if you lean too hard. We've tightened the screws, shimmed the legs, but maybe it's better this way. A reminder that not everything has to be perfect to hold. We don't live without storms. Life doesn't work that way. But when thunder rolls now, when rain starts to drum against the glass, I don't shrink. I don't go silent, because I know that if the knock comes again 3 times sharp and steady, I'll be ready to open the door. And when Alex leaves at night, hoodie pulled up, shoulders broader now, voice deeper than I remember, he says, "Later, Dad." And I say it back. Later, not goodbye, never goodbye. I stand by the window, mug warm in my hands, watching him walk down the hall, and I whisper the same words I said the first night he came back in the rain. "I'm still here." And now finally I mean it.